Friends, please check if you're already subscribed to the channel. Your subscription is very important to us. We need to reach 1,000 subscribers to generate income and continue with the channel. Now, let's get to the video. They clapped for me like I was proof that something in them had gone right. I remember the sound before I remember the room. Applause has a way of flattening details, turning faces into blur, smiles into noise. It was loud. Proud. Performative. My mother's hand was the sharpest. I always knew her rhythm. My father clapped slower, deliberate, like every strike of his palms was measured, controlled, intentional. The way he did everything. I stood there under the lights, my name still echoing faintly in the air, my certificate trembling just enough for me to notice. Not enough for anyone else to see. I smiled because I had practiced that smile in the mirror. The one that said grateful, humble, raised right. The one that made adults nod approvingly and whisper things like she's going places. She gets that from us, my mother said to someone in the front row. Not quietly. Never quietly. I didn't look at her when she said it. I kept my eyes forward. That was the rule. Never steal the spotlight unless invited. Never outshine unless instructed. Never forget who the applause was really for. On the drive home, the car was silent. That silence had weight. Thick. Pressurized. The kind that made my ears ring. The certificate lay across my lap, the paper already creased where my fingers had gripped it too tightly. My father's hand stayed fixed at 10 and 2. My mother stared out the window, her smile gone, replaced with that familiar tightness around her mouth. I watched the streetlights flicker across the windshield and counted them in my head. 1. 2. 3. Counting helped me breathe. Counting helped me stay small. You embarrassed me, my mother said suddenly. The words hit harder because they made no sense. I did exactly what you told me to, I replied, my voice careful, measured, calibrated to not rise too high or sink too low. I replayed the moment in my head, searching for the flaw. Did I thank the wrong person first? Did I smile too wide? Did I hesitate before stepping forward? You smiled too much, she said. It looked arrogant. My father didn't turn his head, but I felt his agreement like a shadow stretching toward me. You think people don't notice that, he added. You think they don't see when a child starts believing her own praise. My throat tightened. I swallowed hard, tasting metal. At home, the house greeted us with its usual stillness. The walls were cream-colored, decorated with framed photos of achievements. Mine. But curated. Cropped. Controlled. Every picture told the same story, look what we made. Dinner was untouched. Plates already set. The clock in the kitchen ticked too loudly. Go to your room, my mother said. We'll talk after. That sentence had lived in my bones since childhood. We'll talk after never meant talking. It meant correction. It meant consequence. It meant that whatever I thought I had done right would be dissected until it bled. I sat on the edge of my bed, still in my nice clothes, the applause replaying in my head like a cruel joke. Somewhere deep inside, a small part of me wanted to believe it. Wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, they were proud. I should have known better. When they came into my room, they closed the door behind them. My mother sat across from me. My father stayed standing. You need to learn balance, she said softly now, her voice honeyed, dangerous. Public success requires private discipline. That night, they took something from me. Not my certificate. Not my clothes. Not my body in any way that would leave marks. They took my voice. By the time the house went quiet again, the applause felt like it had happened to someone else. Someone louder. Someone braver. Someone who didn't yet understand that praise could be a weapon, and love could come with conditions sharp enough to cut you open. And as I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, one thought repeated itself over and over, slow and terrifying. If this is what they do when I succeed, what will they do when I try to leave? I learned early that the rules that mattered most were never spoken out loud. They lived in glances. In pauses. In the way my mother's jaw tightened when I laughed too freely, or how my father's eyes narrowed when I answered a question too quickly. Obedience wasn't about what I did. It was about anticipation. About becoming so attuned to their moods that I could disappear inside them. The next morning, my award sat on the kitchen counter like a crime scene. My mother had placed it there deliberately, angled just enough to be seen, but not touched. It was a reminder. Not of pride, but of restraint. "Don't bring that to school today," she said while stirring her coffee. "You don't want people thinking you're better than them." Yesterday, she wanted the applause. Today, she wanted invisibility. I nodded. Always nodded. At school, teachers congratulated me in the hallway. Friends whispered, excited, asking what it felt like to be recognized like that. I gave them the version of the truth that wouldn't get me in trouble. It was nice, I said. Neutral. Safe. Flat. Inside, something else was happening. Every compliment felt dangerous. Like borrowed time. Like interest accumulating on a debt I hadn't agreed to take. I already knew how this worked. Any joy I collected would be reclaimed later, with penalties. That afternoon, my mother inspected my homework line by line. Not for mistakes, there were none, but for tone. "You sound confident here," she said, tapping the page. "Rewrite it." I just answered the question, I replied before I could stop myself. The room shifted. My father looked up slowly from his chair. "Excuse me." I corrected my posture instantly. Back straight. Hands folded. Eyes down. "I'm sorry. I'll rewrite it." That was another rule, apologize even when you don't understand what you did wrong. Especially then. That night, lying in bed, I started rehearsing conversations in my head before they happened. Entire dialogues. Different versions. If I say this, she'll respond like that. If I say less, maybe it ends faster. If I say nothing, maybe they'll forget me. That was when I realized something terrifying. I wasn't trying to be good anymore. I was trying to be invisible. And the scariest part. They liked me best that way. The praise in public continued. Church. Family gatherings. School events. My parents collected compliments the way some people collect trophies. "She's so mature. She's wise beyond her years. You must be so proud." My mother would smile graciously. My father would nod, solemn, like a man who had sculpted discipline into flesh. At home, those same words became accusations. Mature girls don't need reassurance. Wise children don't ask questions. Pride comes before downfall, remember that. Every achievement raised the bar. Every mistake lowered the ceiling. I stopped celebrating anything. Birthdays felt like inspections. Good grades felt like traps. I learned to dull my excitement before it reached my face. To swallow happiness before it made a sound. One night, while brushing my teeth, I caught my reflection in the mirror and didn't recognize her. Her eyes were alert. Watchful. Like prey. That was the first time I thought it. One day, I'm going to leave. The thought scared me so badly I rinsed my mouth twice, as if I could wash it away. Because in that house, independence wasn't growth. It was betrayal. And betrayals were punished. Backhand index pointing right. If you're still listening, leave a like. It tells me this story deserves to keep going. By the time I turned 15, I had perfected the performance. I knew exactly how much eye contact was respectful without being defiant. I knew when to speak and when silence would earn more approval. I learned how to fold my emotions so tightly inside myself that even I couldn't find them anymore. That was the goal, after all, to feel nothing they could punish. People loved me. Teachers trusted me. Neighbors used me as an example. Other parents pointed at me and sighed, wishing their children were more like her. Every compliment landed on my parents like a paycheck. At home, they refined me. Stand straighter. Lower your voice. Don't eat like that. Why do you need seconds? Why do you need praise? Need. That word was dangerous. Need implied dependence. Dependence implied weakness. Weakness implied failure, their failure. And that was unforgivable. The punishments became quieter as I got older. More surgical. They didn't yell as much anymore. They didn't have to. Disappointment, when wielded correctly, cuts deeper than anger. My mother mastered it. She would sigh softly and say things like, "I just don't recognize you lately," after I expressed the smallest opinion. Or, "We sacrificed so much for you," whenever I wanted something that wasn't already planned for me. My father specialized in silence. Days of it. Weeks, sometimes. He would move through the house as if I were furniture. As if I had already failed some test I didn't know I was taking. I learned to apologize preemptively. "I'm sorry if I came across the wrong way. I didn't mean it like that. I'll do better." Do better meant do less. Want less. Be less. At school, I joined every club they approved of. I excelled in every subject they bragged about. I smiled in every photo. I laughed at jokes that made me uncomfortable. I dated no one, because desire was a distraction, and distractions were selfish. At night, alone in my room, I would lie awake and imagine another version of myself. One who talked too loud. One who failed a test and survived it. One who said no and didn't collapse afterward. I never told anyone what happened in that house. Not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't have the language. Abuse didn't look like this in the movies. There were no bruises to point to. No screaming matches behind thin walls. There was just control wrapped in praise. Love with conditions. Affection that expired the moment I stepped out of line. Sometimes, when my parents praised me in public, I felt sick. Because I knew what would follow. Sure enough, after one particularly glowing parent-teacher meeting, my mother waited until we got home, closed the door, and said calmly, "You talk too much about yourself." I stood there, heart racing, trying to understand. "I was answering their questions," I said. She tilted her head. Smiled. "Confidence is a thin line. Don't cross it." That night, I cried silently into my pillow, careful not to make a sound. I cried for the girl everyone loved, and the girl no one ever asked about. And somewhere between those two versions of me, something hardened. A thought I didn't dare finish. They don't love me. They own me. Backhand index pointing right. If this resonates, tap like. You're not alone in this. The first real mistake I made wasn't loud. It wasn't rebellious. It wasn't even intentional. It was human. I was 17. Tired in a way sleep couldn't fix. My body moved on autopilot most days, fueled by expectation and fear. That afternoon, I came home later than usual, 23 minutes late. I had stayed after school to help a friend who was crying in the bathroom. I remember holding her while she shook, thinking how strange it was that I could comfort someone else but never myself. When I opened the front door, the house was too quiet. My mother sat at the dining table. My father stood by the window. No TV. No music. No distractions. I knew immediately. "Where were you?" my father asked. His voice was even. That was worse. I told the truth. Every word of it. I had learned that lies only delayed the punishment. My mother listened without interrupting, her fingers folded neatly in front of her. When I finished, she nodded once. "So," she said, "you chose someone else over us." The air left my lungs. "That's not," I stopped myself. Corrected my tone. "I didn't mean it like that." "You didn't call," my father said. "You didn't ask." I stared at the floor. "I didn't think." "Exactly," my mother cut in. "You didn't think." That was when it shifted. When something in her eyes hardened. She stood and walked toward me slowly, deliberately, as if every step was a lesson. "We give you everything," she said. "Structure. Opportunities. A future. And you repay us with irresponsibility." Irresponsible. For helping a friend. They didn't yell. They didn't need to. They took turns dissecting me, calmly, methodically, explaining how my actions reflected selfishness, arrogance, ingratitude. Then came the real punishment. They took my door. Not slammed. Not ripped off in anger. My father unscrewed the hinges quietly while my mother watched. I stood there, frozen, unsure if I was allowed to cry. "Privacy is earned," my father said. "And you've shown us you're not ready for it." For weeks, I changed clothes in the bathroom. Slept with the hallway light bleeding into my room. Every movement monitored. Every breath audible. At school, my parents still smiled. Still bragged. Still accepted praise for raising such a responsible young woman. I started dissociating. I would stare at my hands and feel like they weren't mine. I would listen to my parents talk and feel like I was underwater. Sometimes, I'd forget whole conversations and only realize later when I was punished for not following instructions I didn't remember receiving. One night, lying exposed in my doorless room, I realized something terrifying. They weren't trying to correct me. They were trying to break me. And for the first time, the thought of leaving didn't just scare me. It felt necessary. The idea of leaving didn't arrive like hope. It arrived like treason. At first, it was just a thought I pushed away whenever it surfaced, usually late at night, when the house was quiet and I could almost pretend I belonged to myself. I told myself I was being dramatic. Ungrateful. Weak. All the words they had taught me to use against myself. But once a thought takes root, it doesn't ask permission to grow. I started noticing exits everywhere. College brochures that came in the mail. Campuses with dorm rooms and doors that locked. Cities far enough away that my parents' voices wouldn't follow me into every room. I hid the pamphlets under my mattress like contraband. Planning became my secret language. I memorized application deadlines the way I used to memorize their moods. I stayed up late filling out forms, my heart pounding every time the floor creaked. I learned how to erase browser history. How to sound casual when asking teachers for recommendation letters. "Why do you need that?" my mother asked once, narrowing her eyes at an envelope on my desk. "For scholarships," I said. True. Partial truths were safer. She hummed thoughtfully. "Just remember, you wouldn't be where you are without us." That was another rule, never let them forget they believed they owned my future. I stopped telling them my dreams. I wrote them instead. In a notebook I kept hidden inside an old textbook, pages filled with thoughts I was too afraid to say out loud. Some nights, I wrote about freedom like it was a place. Other nights, I wrote about revenge and scared myself with how vivid it felt. The more I planned, the more dangerous they became. My mother started checking my phone more often. My father asked pointed questions about my friends, my teachers, my attitude. Any sign of independence was treated like a symptom of disease. "You're changing," my mother said one night, her voice soft but sharp underneath. I don't like it. Neither did they. When the acceptance letter came, I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I sat on my bed, doorless, holding the paper with shaking hands. Far enough away. Enough financial aid. Enough distance to breathe. I folded the letter and hid it with the others. That night, my parents praised me at dinner. My grades. My discipline. My maturity. I smiled. Thanked them. Played my role perfectly. Inside, something was counting down. Because I knew this now, with terrifying clarity. The closer I got to leaving, the more dangerous love would become. The house changed before they ever said anything. Control always does. My mother became sweeter. That was the first sign. Compliments slipped into her voice like honey over glass, too smooth, too deliberate. She cooked my favorite meals. Asked about my day. Laughed a little louder at my jokes. My father started giving advice. "You know," he said one evening, leaning back in his chair, "some people aren't ready for the real world at 18. It eats them alive." I kept my face neutral. "I know. You're sensitive," my mother added gently. "We worry about you. You depend on structure." Structure. Their favorite word for confinement. They didn't know about the letters yet. The emails. The plans stacked quietly in my mind. But they could feel the shift. Control like theirs doesn't need proof, its senses escape the way predators sense movement. The punishments returned, subtle at first. Curfews tightened. Phone privileges shortened. Invitations declined on my behalf. "No," my mother said brightly, hanging up the phone. "She's too busy. Busy preparing to disappear." One night, my father stood in my doorway, where the door still hadn't been returned, and asked, "If we weren't here, what do you think you'd do?" It was a test. I chose my words carefully. "I'd probably mess up," I said. "I need guidance." He smiled. Satisfied. That night, I wrote in my notebook until my hand cramped. I wrote about the version of me they were trying to trap, the obedient echo, the grateful shadow. And then I wrote about the version of me they didn't know yet. The one who could leave without permission. The closer the departure date crept, the more frantic they became. My mother cried one afternoon over nothing. Or everything. "I just feel you pulling away," she said, clutching my hand too tightly. "After all we've done. I don't know who you'd be without us." Without you, I thought, I might finally exist. But I said nothing. The night before my high school graduation, my father sat me down. "You're not like other kids," he said. "You don't need distance. You need family." The words landed heavy. I realized then that leaving wouldn't just disappoint them. It would expose them. And they would not let that happen quietly. They found the letter by accident. That's what my mother said later. Accident. But nothing in that house ever happened without intention. I came home from school and felt it immediately, the air was wrong. Heavy. Still. My notebook was gone from its hiding place. My mattress had been lifted and placed back down with care that felt insulting. My parents were in the living room. The acceptance letter lay on the coffee table between them, smoothed flat, exposed. My future stripped naked under the light. My mother looked up first. Her eyes were wet. Not with sadness, with something sharper. "How long," she asked quietly, "were you planning to abandon us?" The word hit like a slap. I wasn't, my voice shook. I hated that. I was just trying to. To what? My father interrupted, standing now. Escape. After everything we gave you. I felt 16 versions of myself collapse inward. I earned this, I said before I could stop myself. Silence. The kind that rewrites history. My mother stood slowly, her chair scraping against the floor. You earned nothing without us, she said. That confidence, that arrogance, that came from somewhere. She stepped closer. Too close. You were going to leave without asking, she whispered. Without permission. Permission. The room spun. They talked for hours. Or minutes. Time fractured. Every sentence they spoke rewrote my memories, reframed my pain as cruelty toward them. They cried. Accused. Recounted sacrifices. Threatened without threatening. You're not ready. You'll fail. You'll come crawling back. We're protecting you. At some point, my father said, if you walk out that door, don't expect support. My mother followed with, don't expect forgiveness. Something inside me went very still. Because I finally understood the truth they never said out loud. Their love was conditional on my captivity. I went to my room that night and packed a bag with shaking hands. Not everything. Just enough. The notebook. The letters. Clothes folded like prayers. I didn't sleep. At dawn, I stood in the hallway, heart pounding so hard it felt like it might betray me. My parents' door was closed. For once, they weren't watching. I opened the front door. The sound echoed through the house like a gunshot. My mother's voice followed me. If you leave, she called, don't bother coming back. I stepped outside. The air felt wrong. Too open. Too free. Terrifying. But I kept walking. Because for the first time in my life, the punishment behind me felt less dangerous than the silence ahead. I thought leaving would feel like relief. Like exhaling after holding my breath my entire life. Instead, it felt like stepping off a cliff and realizing halfway down that I didn't know how to land. The first night away from that house, I slept on a mattress that wasn't mine, in a room that didn't know my history. Every sound made my body tense. Every silence felt like a trap. I woke up every hour, heart racing, convinced I had done something wrong and punishment was coming. But no one came. No footsteps. No door opening. No voice calling my name with that familiar mix of sweetness and threat. The quiet was unbearable. I kept expecting guilt to crush me the way they said it would. I waited for regret. For shame. For the realization that I had made a terrible mistake. What came instead was grief. Not for them. For me. For the girl who learned how to disappear so well that even she couldn't find herself anymore. For the child who thought love had to hurt to be real. For every moment I swallowed my own voice because survival demanded silence. Freedom didn't feel like celebration. It felt like withdrawal. At college, people asked simple questions that made my chest tighten. What do you want to major in? Where do you want to live? What kind of life do you see for yourself? I didn't know how to answer. No one had ever asked me that before. When I failed my first exam, I didn't cry because of the grade. I cried because no one yelled at me. No one punished me. No one told me I was ungrateful or arrogant or embarrassing. I had been trained to associate mistakes with pain. Without it, I felt untethered. Some nights, I almost called them. Not because I missed them, but because control was familiar. Because being owned felt safer than being unknown. Trauma has a way of disguising cages as comfort. But then I would remember my mother's voice at the door. Don't bother coming back. and something inside me would harden again. Weeks passed. Then months. Slowly, painfully, I started noticing changes. I laughed without checking who was listening. I disagreed without apologizing. I sat with my emotions instead of burying them. And every time I did, a voice in my head whispered, "You're selfish. You're ungrateful. You're wrong." That voice sounded exactly like them. That's when I realized something terrifying and liberating at the same time. They didn't need to punish me anymore. They had trained me to do it myself. Backhand index pointing right. If you're still here, leave a like. The next part is about breaking the voice they left behind. The voice didn't leave when I did. It followed me into classrooms. Into friendships. Into mirrors. It commented on everything, how I spoke, how I dressed, how much space I took up. It judged my joy. It corrected my posture. It punished my rest. "You're doing too much. Don't get comfortable. Someone's going to take this away." At first, I thought healing meant silencing it. I tried ignoring it. Outworking it. Proving it wrong. None of that worked. The voice got louder when I resisted, sharper when I succeeded. Because it wasn't just fear. It was training. The breakthrough came in the least dramatic way possible. A professor pulled me aside after class and said, "You don't have to be perfect to be here." I nodded automatically. Smiled. Thanked her. Then I went back to my dorm and cried so hard I scared myself. Because something inside me cracked, not from pain, but from recognition. That sentence didn't threaten me. It didn't come with conditions. It didn't demand repayment. I started therapy after that. Quietly. Reluctantly. Sitting across from someone who didn't know my parents, didn't revere them, didn't owe them loyalty. The first time I said, "They hurt me," out loud, my body shook. The second time, I believed it. Healing wasn't linear. Some days I felt powerful. Other days I felt 6 years old again, bracing for punishment that never came. But slowly, the voice began to change. It still spoke, but now I could hear where it came from. "That's not me," I'd think. "That's them." Every time I chose rest over performance, it weakened. Every time I set a boundary, it cracked. Every time I succeeded without punishment following, it lost credibility. One day, months later, I realized something startling. I had gone an entire afternoon without hearing it. No accusations. No warnings. No shame. Just quiet. That was when anger arrived. Real anger. Clean anger. The kind that doesn't implode, it clarifies. They had praised me in public and punished me in private not because I was exceptional, but because they needed control to survive. My success had never been the goal. My obedience was. And once I saw that clearly, there was no unseeing it. Backhand index pointing right. If you've ever had to unlearn a voice that wasn't yours, tap like. The final part is coming. Years later, someone praised me in public again. A conference room this time. Different city. Different life. My name projected onto a screen behind me while people nodded, impressed, attentive. I spoke calmly. Confidently. In my own voice. Applause filled the room. And for the first time, I didn't flinch. I didn't scan the exits. I didn't brace for punishment. I didn't shrink afterward. I just stood there and let it exist. That's how I knew I was free. Afterward, a colleague smiled and said, "You must have had really supportive parents." The old version of me would have laughed. Deflected. Protected the myth. Instead, I said, "I raised myself." The truth didn't burn anymore. I went home that night to an apartment that was quiet in a way that felt chosen. I cooked dinner badly. Left dishes in the sink. Laughed too loud at nothing. Took up space. Sometimes, I still think about them. Not with longing, but with clarity. They needed me small so they could feel big. They needed my obedience to justify their control. They needed to punish me in private because the public version of me threatened the story they told about themselves. I don't hate them. But I no longer protect them. That's the boundary. The applause doesn't scare me now because I finally understand something they never wanted me to learn. Praise doesn't belong to anyone else. Success doesn't require suffering. And love that demands silence was never love at all. If you're listening to this and recognizing yourself. If you were celebrated in public and dismantled in private. If your achievements were used as leashes. Know this. You were never too much. You were never arrogant. You were never ungrateful. You were just growing in a place that needed you to stay small. And leaving was the bravest thing you ever did. Before you go, if this story meant something to you, subscribe, leave a like, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. Stories like this survive because people recognize themselves in them.